Ruslan.
What is unfaithfulness in a marriage in terms of grounds for divorce? Now, many of us who have been following Jesus for a while, we know that in the confines of a marriage, if there is unfaithfulness with regards to adultery, that is grounds for divorce, and that is the only grounds that Jesus seems to co-sign. But when it comes to the idea of fisticuffs in a marriage, when it comes to the idea of overt physical violence, I'm trying to say this without getting the video demonetized, in a marriage, is that grounds for someone to leave? Or, in the words of our Johnny Mac fanboys, our John MacArthur fanboys, and some of our Catholic friends, does the person just have to stay and endure? That is a discussion. Now, I found it interesting that Abba and Preach brought it up in their latest video called, this is a crazy video, Your Husband Beats You, No Divorce, Endure It. And this is from the Whatever podcast, and apparently this is a argument being made that women who are in these situations should stay in these situations. And we saw this entire thing also play out at Johnny Mac's church, and we've covered it extensively, where there was a lady who was alleging that her husband was doing this in their home, and they excommunicated her and did a public statement on her just 20 years ago, and that there had been other stories that have came out from that church, similar things. So this isn't just Catholics, okay? This is some Calvinists as well, all right? So let's look at this clip, and then I'll play you guys another clip, and I'll give you and kind of give you guys some context on this, all right? Check this out.
If there's someone that's very, very young, might be really religious and like values marriage a lot, and goes into a marriage and has kids when they're like 18, 19, 20, and then a year into the relationship, it gets really, really...
From who?
From both.
This is so rare.
Anyone
so
really.
Rare.
I mean, it happens.
Go on.
My point is, I'm just, even though it might be rare from what you guys think,
it is.
If it would happen...
I dislike how in the framing of the question that she's instantly dismissed that this is rare. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men. 25% experience severe intimate partner physical. I don't appreciate how dismissive they are. And again, these guys are professed Catholics. I don't know if this is official Catholic theology, but this is kind of nuts.
Then what would you recommend for those people to do? Would they divorce, or do you want them to keep going in the relationship?
Keep going. You can't divorce. I mean, that's not a real thing. You can like separate. See, his Catholic background shines through. He knows. You can separate, but you can't actually divorce. That's not a real thing.
Even though it might be like physically abusive?
You got to endure. People are too...
You want to stick in the...
This is a sickness of the highest order.
Darkness. Darkness. Darkness.
Wow.
I understand the sentiment that people feel like folks divorce too easily and for the wrong reasons. Okay. I understand. And I can even get behind that sentiment to a degree.
I think that's a fair sentiment to have. I would agree with them. I think we have made this very flippant in our culture. But that does not mean that what's being said here is accurate.
But also, people marry for the wrong reason and too easily. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say.
Do they? I don't know if I agree or preach.
Beating your wife is a good reason for a divorce. Like you can say, okay, well, I stuck through it and we figured out, and maybe you have, but expecting other people who are getting their ass beat to stay in a marriage where they're getting beaten up is crazy. Endure. People quit too easily nowadays. What? That's a response to somebody who's being physically beaten by their partner? You know, they sit here and they talk about single parent households this, single parent households that. Do you think it's good to raise a child?
In a violent environment, that's even worse. There's some relationship, you talk about it's bad to be single. There's some people that are still together and has been a detriment to kids. Why? Because it was a toxic environment, but whatever.
I'll even say this. I think it's far worse to grow up in an environment where your dad beats your mom on a regular basis, or he beats the kids, or she beats him, whatever it might be. That's way worse than growing up in a single parent household.
I would agree. As someone that's experienced both, I would agree.
You do realize that most of the people who die in relationships as a result of spousal violence are women, right? So how do you expect any of your movements to be taken seriously and to not be seen as anti-women when your advice to women who are being beaten up by their partners is endure?
Everybody
I mean, is it weird that I agree with Abba and Preach over the self-professed Catholics? Is that? And by the way, Correct me if I'm wrong. That is what I'm being told. I know the guy in the black on white shirt who's awfully quiet here. I wish he would speak up. Is a Christian or professes to be a Christian. I've actually reached out to him before.
To me personally, the person who decides to lay their hands on the person they're supposed to protect to their dying breath is probably the deadbeat loser who gave up on the relationship.
Hello.
But maybe that's a hot take. Maybe I'm the retard in all this.
I'll tell you what.
Endure.
I'll tell you what I would do. If my daughter was in a relationship with a guy and she gets married to him and he starts abusing her a year into it.
No.
Wait.
No. Time out. Time out. What the f*** did you say? Time out.
No way. There's no way.
Time out.
The hypocrisy here is wild, yo.
So when it's your daughter kill him, no, she shouldn't do it. But when it's other people, they shouldn't get divorced. What?
So
Yeah.
if you're so you see how they have different rules for the women in their lives, but for the women in general that they're not connected to, who they don't have to have any empathy for, they're saying endure.
Cards.
Yeah, that's a L. That's a massive L.
And the reality is people just haven't learned to endure. There have been hard times in a relationship. I'm sure you guys had hard times in a
Yuck!
relationship. Any relationship has hard times. And it
Okay.
is what it is. You need to push through.
Hard times is such a general thing. So it's like there's a difference between you guys are going through financial struggles and you giving your girl black eyes because you don't like her job. You know what I mean? Like there's a difference between those two things.
Yuck. All right. So, give you guys a trusty source on this, a trusted source on this. Some of you guys know we've covered this before. Pastor Mike Winger's assessment of this. Pastor Mike Winger, Calvary Chapel pastor, way smarter than I am, way more educated. And here's his thoughts on this. Check this out.
Use or extreme situations. First, let me say this. The answer I'm giving right now does not apply in most situations. It doesn't apply to most marriages. Please guard your heart. We are called as Christians to turn the other cheek, to forgive 70 times 7, to be gracious and loving and kind, and to just go the extra mile. But we are not called to just sit there and stay in a marriage of abuse. My 13th principle, and I'm going to tell you the principle first this time, and then I'll give you biblical reasons for it. Radical danger or harm justifies separation and divorce. Radical danger or harm. It justifies not only separation, but also divorce. Now, I'm going to give you a number of examples in the scripture and then show you how to apply that to divorce. Examples where any kind of radical harm or danger, it justifies, generally speaking, breaking rules. You know, we know the rule of the Old Testament. Like, maybe you know this, right? You don't eat the showbread. The showbread is for the temple and it's for the priests. Only they can eat it. But in Matthew 12:3, Jesus says something where there was an exception to that rule. And he says, have you not read what David did when he was hungry and those who were with him? How he entered the house of God and he ate the bread of the presence, which it is not lawful for him to eat, nor for those who were with him, but only for the priests. So the principle seems to be, well, David's life is in danger. He's being chased by Saul. He needs food to continue on his journey and save his own life. And Jesus seems to be approving of his eating of the showbread, but there's a law against it because this is an exception to that law. There's a lot of other examples of these types of things. Matthew 12, verses 5 through 7. We'll just scroll down a bit. Jesus talks about this and the Sabbath. Or have you not read in the law how on the Sabbath, the priests of the temple profane the Sabbath and are guiltless, right? Because they're laboring in the temple on the Sabbath. This is interesting, isn't it? Wait, they profane, but they're guiltless? And then he goes on to explain the principle they didn't understand. He says, I tell you something greater than the temple is here. And if you had known what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice. You would not have condemned the guiltless. For the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. When a woman or husband, it's not as often common, but it does happen. When a woman leaves or flees, or a guy, because of abuse of themselves or of the children, and they have to get out of Dodge, to tell them that they are required to stay faithful to that marriage and to not divorce and to stick with that person, I think it condemns the guiltless. And I think that it's violating the God desires mercy and not sacrifice principle. So if you're saving someone or you're healing life, like let me give you another example here. Same chapter, Matthew 12, verses 11 and 12. Violating the Sabbath, so to speak, in at least their view of the Sabbath, their overly strict view of the Sabbath, just like some people's overly strict view of marriage. Matthew 12:11, it says, which one of you has a sheep? If it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will take hold of it and lift it out. And of course they would. They would all have done that. And then he goes on to say, of how much more value is the man than the sheep? So it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. Yeah, don't work on the Sabbath, but you can do good on the Sabbath. There's some great good deed that needs to be done. Well, it is good to encourage a woman to depart from a seriously abusive situation, or a man, or kids for that matter. That's a general good. You got to have some wisdom here. That's why. And again, finally, to get to where we are today, you're not to divorce except for adultery. I would say, unless essential health is at risk. After all, this is the commonality among so many examples of exceptions to the rule in the Bible and from the mouth of Jesus. It alone doesn't answer all the questions, but there's a principle that we can say, we can obey this principle with wisdom when life is at stake.
And this is the difference between God's laws and the letter of the law, and understanding God's laws, the spirit of the law, and what we would call a Christian New Testament virtue ethic, right? When you have a virtue ethic, it's less about the letter of the law and it's using your brain and reason to process situations like this. So listen to what Pastor Mike is describing here.
But there's a principle that we can say, we can obey this principle with wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
When life is at stake, when serious health concerns are at stake, yes, you can get out of Dodge, you could flee, you could hide, you could do whatever you need to do. Jesus' instruction in the scripture is based on getting the heart of marriage.
Yep.
Therefore, we can evaluate his instruction as a principle about the heart of marriage, not an unbending law that doesn't allow for exceptions. Jesus does this with other issues like the Sabbath. And Paul offers an exception, Jesus offers multiple exceptions. We can extend that to abuse, I think, easily.
Amen.
Jesus' similar understanding of exceptions for life or health when understanding the heart of the Sabbath or other laws, it seems to indicate that there's at least room for considering that the same kind of exceptions would exist in Jesus' teaching on the topic of marriage.
That's
It's
right.
consistent with Jesus. It's consistent with the Old Testament. It's how Jews at the time would have applied it, right? According to Instone Brewer and Craig Keener, the Jews of the time would have assumed there were exceptions to any rule that Jesus had given. They would just assume there's other exceptions. And it's consistent with compassion. And perhaps that's what Paul meant when he says we're not enslaved. We're not talking about making marriage a slavery situation. It's not meant to be that. And so in such cases where marriage is becoming slavery,
a Christian virtue ethic, right? So if you are in the Holocaust and the Nazis come, are you going to protect and hide Jews? You got Jews and you tucked away. Are you going to hide them? Of course you are, right? This is the difference. It's not, well, the letter of the law says do not lie. Yeah, but what is the spirit of the law? Right? What is the spirit of the law? And this is what I mean by a Christian New Testament virtue ethic. You have to use your brain, right? You have to reason. You have to think through these things. So yes, I would absolutely say, and this is why the Christian virtue ethic I think is substantially better, because it trumps the attempt at making ethics and morality from the world, whether that's the Kant's model, whether that's the utilitarian model. The Christian virtue ethic trumps both of those. You know what I mean? And so, so those are my thoughts on that. Let me know what you guys think. Shout out to Abba and Preach for covering this. I know this was tough.
Las Vegas, join me, and some of you guys might be familiar with my boy Ruslan KD.
Las Vegas, join me for the Christian Influencers Convention happening July 26th from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m.
We'll be doing a panel with some of the top influencers in the country, as well as a private, intimate meet and greet.
You can get tickets and more information by hitting the Eventbrite link below.
Don't miss this opportunity to come and hang out and spend some time with some of your favorite Christian influencers.
All in the beautiful city of Las Vegas. July 26th, I'll see you over there. Peace.
I'll see you there. What do you mean?
Ruslan.
Our friends at Genucel Skincare have exciting news to celebrate in 2023.
Using Manscaped during my showers after workout has given me much more confidence.
And that's where Mudwater comes in.
True Classic has got your back.
All thanks to the sponsor of today's video, SayMine.com.
Established Titles is your opportunity to earn the title of Laird or Lady. Subject to credit approval, rates range from 7.99% APR to 19.99% APR, included 0.50% auto pay discount.
If you don't want us to make ads with brands you don't care about, sign up for our online community for as little as $5 a month to keep us independent and ultimately answering to you as our boss. You get all sorts of benefits like daily replays of our after party streams, exclusive access to our Discord community, and early access to our podcast interviews, all starting for only $5 a month.
King Street.